Welcome back to Critical Reviews. I am Captain Xavier, and as promised in my original review of this blaster, today I'm going to do a critical review of this blaster. The original review was looking at it on its own merits. What did it say on the box? What was actually in the box? What does that mean from a regular, standard consumer perspective? Today I'm going to be looking at it from the hobby perspective. How does this stand up within the hobby space? What can we do with it? What could we expect from it, hope from it? What might have been done differently or better or what have you? And that's going to be fun. There are some surprises in here. There is going to be some rehashing. First off, it's Talon Mag compatible. I gushed about that in the original, and I'm gonna gush about it more. That is absolutely brilliant. I never would have expected Hasbro to actually do that, but they did, and it is absolutely wonderful. I could go on about that, but I'm not going to. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna test this with some new ammo types. So when I tested it with the ammo it came with, it was averaging around 160. The box claimed 150, it's actually hitting 160. That's actually a bit spicy for some of our events. A lot of our events cap at 150. So I'm gonna try it with some different ammos and see if we can get it, if it's a little bit lower. So let's head to the chronograph and put a bunch of different darts through this thing. I have first the darts it came with, the AccuStrike half darts. Then I have some cut down Adventure Force waffles, then some Adventure Force Max darts, some Adventure Force Pro darts, some bamboo darts, and then the Worker Gen 3s. And we'll see what kind of performance we get with each. So we'll start with theirs. 152, 152, 149. Battery might be getting a little bit low. Let's take a look at the Adventure Force. 149, 147, 152. So roughly the same as the AccuStrikes, which makes sense because they've got similar heads. Now we're going to be firing different heads. So we've got the Max darts. Oh, I missed. 155, 147. So again, about the same. 142, 148. 155. We're on to the bamboos. 158, 156, 159, and finally the workers. 153, 155, 133. So they're roughly the same, and currently they're all hitting under 160, which is important. Because a lot of events, well, I don't know about a lot of events, but Burst, 160 is our hard cap. If you have a single shot that goes over 160, you're out. The soft cap is 150, so you're trying to be around 150, ideally. And currently, this would have worked. So, yeah, it will fire all the different darts. I don't know how accurately it fires them. That would be a whole exhaustive range test, and I don't plan to do that today. Fascinating. So in this test, pretty much all the darts hit under 160, which is good for Borst, but very consistently. And that's kind of the impressive thing, is it didn't matter what I was firing, the darts were fairly consistent. There were a few outliers, but nothing unreasonable. So the fact that it works well with a variety of darts, very, very cool. Not every blaster will do that. Some are real picky about what darts work in them. This one seems to work well with just about anything, so that's pretty cool. Now let's talk about this from the hobby perspective. From a standard consumer perspective, the fact that it comes with its own proprietary USB charged battery is amazing. From our perspective, less so, because we already have the LiPo infrastructure. We have LiPos, we have chargers. We'd rather have blasters that could do that. And Dart Zone has been making their blasters work with both consumer grade batteries, AA's, but it also has an XT60 jack, and you can just plug in your XT60 and go. This doesn't have that, and they could have had it have both. It would not be difficult to splice in an XT60 connector in such a way that you could still use this, or say have a battery stock with an XT60 in it. As we'll see when we get the wiring, when we open this up and look at the wiring, it's ridiculously simple. In fact, let's just go to that. Let's get this thing open and you can see another amazing choice that was made. So let's get this thing open. All right, we are in, and as you may have already noticed, while this is a Stryfe on the outside, it is very different from a Stryfe on the inside. And some of that's good and some of that's bad. I like some of the changes I made, but there is some downsides to it. One, this is an incredibly simple system. It has a grand total of 1 switch and 3 wires and 1 board that has the jack for the battery. But it has 1 big Omron style switch, a big, heavy, high current switch, and then it's got 3 wires. It's got positive from the battery to the switch, positive from the switch to the flywheels, negative to the flywheels. That's it. It's the simplest Stryfe wiring that you can possibly do, and it's amazing because it's less points of failure. There's no magazine lock switch, there's no jam door lock switch, there is nothing preventing you from, or fewer things that could go wrong. Bad switches, bad solders. The simpler the system, the more reliable it is. And for a pro blaster, that's really, really good. Now those safeties usually exist for a reason, but this is a pro level blaster, it's 14 plus, they're expecting more from us, and so taking out some of those safety features and features that could prevent you from breaking your own blaster, and I'm with them on that. That is really cool that they simplified this to that point. And the fact that they used a proper standard Omron switch, so if it does go bad, we can easily replace it. That's super cool. The one lock it does have is the rev lock, so you do have to be revving the blaster to fire. And that's a good safety to have, in my opinion, because otherwise you can push a dart into the flywheels when they're not spinning. This prevents you from doing that. There is a safety that prevents you from being able to pull the rev trigger of all things, which then of course prevents you from pulling the main trigger. And that's cool, and it's a simple part. That's it. You take that out, now there's no safety. No spring, no complicated parts, no screws, nothing, just that. Again, very simple, unlikely to fail. But if you're worried about accidentally locking your blaster and you don't want that, super easy to remove. I assume they had to have a safety because of how hard it fires. So they had to put it in, but it's really easy to remove. The pusher is also completely different, and this is both good and bad. It's now a geared pusher, which I love geared pushers. They are so snappy and responsive. I absolutely love them. My favorite trigger pusher system before this was the Hailfire, which is just the snappiest, smoothest of triggers. This now has the potential for that, once you do the mod that I did. The downside is it means that this system is not compatible with anything that we already have. None of our existing kits are going to be able to, almost certainly none of our kits are going to be able to just drop in. Existing triggers, existing pushers, hybrid pushers, select fire, full auto kits, none of those are going to fit in this shell. We're going to have to redevelop them if we want to use them in this shell. That is unfortunate, but I understand why they did it, and I approve of it. Really good wheels. I don't know what they're made out of, but they are not just injection molded plastic. They are something fancy. The cage is also definitely made out of something other than standard plastic. It looks more like a Delrin or a heavier plastic. Loving that. That's why that all works so well. 160 motors, which is why we have that larger cage. So we got fast spin up time, we got good torque, we've got good recovery time between shots. All of that, fabulous. Our magazine release here, I'm sure it'll be no time before somebody designs one that you can reach with your middle finger so that you can use your rev trigger to release the magazine for people who like it that way. I like the paddle one myself, so again, I like that. One thing that I noted is, yep, sure enough, the front end is... Oh, where do you think you're going? You are going nowhere, sir. You just hold your horses. I'll get to you. The front end is different. This whole section and the barrel and that all used to come out as one unit and could then be replaced by ones from like Worker, which then allowed you to put the Worker cosmetic kits on. This is now part of the shell, which means you're either going to have to modify those Worker connections, or you're going to have to do some shell cutting so that you can get the Worker one on here. That's a backwards compatibility issue. Not one that I would expect them to care about. I don't expect Hasbro to care about whether or not we can put our Worker kits on their blasters, but from a person inside the hobby, it would have been cool if we could have. That's one of the beautiful things about the Stryfe is there are so many cosmetic kits, so many internal kits, and unfortunately it turns out we can't use a lot of them. The way the handle is designed there's a lot of cosmetic kits like the Chris Vector kit won't properly connect because it used to connect onto the cap or onto the sling mount here. Now you might be able to cut the original one so it would fit and work it in there, or you can design a new thing that connects onto here. Chris Vector kit also relied on the barrel lug, which doesn't exist. So there's a lot less backwards compatibility than I thought there would be when I first learned that it was a Stryfe. I was like, oh, cool, it's a Stryfe, all of our stuff will work. Not so much. The cage, I don't believe, is a standard Stryfe cage either. It's really close, but it isn't quite a Stryfe cage, which also doesn't surprise me. They probably had to change. That's probably also why this is a separate piece now, because I think the wheels might be a little bit bigger, which is why the cage is a little bit bigger, and so the mounting points aren't going to be in the same spot. Obviously, we can create new ones if we really want to, but with all the other non-backwards compatible stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't do that a lot, because then this is a really expensive Stryfe. If all those kits that already exist work on a regular Stryfe, why would you get this one that they don't work in? And we'd have to redevelop all of those, and people probably almost certainly still will. So yeah, that's interesting. Some good stuff, some bad stuff. The mod that I did. So I've already done a mod to this, like I said, and I made it so that the trigger is now super, super snappy. Originally, it had 2 return springs on the pusher system. It had one here behind the trigger, and then it had, which was a compression spring, and then it had a tension spring that was up on the pusher arm, like it is in a regular Stryfe. The Stryfe doesn't usually have this spring, though it has the parts to have one there, it just isn't. And between those two, it had a fairly heavy trigger pull. And it really felt like a Stryfe. It felt like the standard pusher arm Stryfe, levered fired Stryfe. And so I didn't even think that this was going to have a geared pusher. That caught me by surprise. And so I wondered what would happen if you eliminated one of those springs. Well, if you eliminate just the trigger spring, it still just feels like a Stryfe. It's a little bit lighter trigger pull, but it's still heavy enough to return even under the tension on the magazine. But I got rid of this one and just had the trigger, and it became so snappy it was ridiculous. It felt like a hailfire. It was amazing. But that stock spring didn't have enough to overcome the tension from the magazine. And so I doubled it up, and now it does. And if we just slap this together real quick, we now have just the snappiest of triggers. And I love it. I love that trigger feel so much. I tested it with several magazines, and it was able to return just fine. I haven't tested it with, say, the drum mag or one of the heavy Tachi mags. That might be a little much for it, but I don't plan to run those in this. I run the 18s in almost all of my loadouts. Train? The drum is really tight in the magwell. It does fit, but it's real tight. So again, it wouldn't be something that I plan to run in this very often. But that snappy trigger pull makes me want to run this just because it's so snappy. So there's my thoughts on the internals. Oh, there is one more thing, actually. The warning label, there is a eyewear required label, but it's a removable part. Rather than it just being painted on or whatever, it's on a removable plate that is right there, which would, gosh, that looks like the place you would put an LC, a little display for, or controls for a select fire kit, or there's all sorts of things that you could put right there that it's just conveniently easy. So they may have, say, a select fire, just flinging stuff out of here now. They may have plans for a select fire where they, I don't know, thought we might like to do a select fire. But having that little door easily removed it doesn't seem like an accident. If they just wanted to have a warning label, they could have just painted on a warning label. But putting that there makes me think there's something going on. So I did have one interesting thing. One of my screw posts has exploded. This one right here, it looks like it's just been munched. And it's also just blown out on this side, and I don't know what's up with that. It doesn't prevent anything from working, and it's not getting in the way of anything. I'm just really curious how that happened. And I'd be curious if it's happened to anybody else's. It might be just something weird in the manufacturing process, the build process. Anyway, I'm gonna button this up and finish talking about it. Note on the screws, all but one screw is the same size. The screw that goes up here in the front rail where it's really narrow is the one smaller screw. All the rest are exactly the same. So that's really cool. All right, let's reassemble. So, final thoughts. This is still a really solid 3S half-dart Stryfe. From a hobby perspective, the lack of backwards compatibility is somewhat disappointing. The fact that all 10 years worth of development of internal kits, none of them are going to work. We're going to have to redo them all. Though it won't be as hard as it was to develop them in the first place. The fact that a lot of cosmetic kits, some of the favorite cosmetic kits won't work because of the grip, or the lack of a barrel lug, or possibly the difference in rail, difference in size of the magwell, the size of the motor cover and the battery housing. That's going to affect some cosmetic kits, and that's unfortunate, but that is kind of the price of progress. And also, it just isn't something you can expect Hasbro to be worried about, whether or not you're going to be able to use other people's third-party stuff in their blaster. It would be lovely if they would worry about that, but it just isn't reasonable. I'm still amazed they made it take Talon mags. I cannot say that enough. I'm amazed and baffled, and I can forgive a lot of other compatibility issues because the one that really matters functionally, they got right. So yeah, it is a solid 3S build, and it would be super simple to just splice in an XD60 connector, and now it will take lipos, and you don't have to. You can use your existing batteries and chargers and all of that. Get yourself a nice battery stock, good to go. It's not going to replace your FDL3. It's not going to replace your SFB, SBF. It's not going to replace your Momentum. It's not going to replace, you know, probably your personal 3S Stryfe that you painstakingly built and that has all of your favorite features. But it wasn't meant to. It's meant as an intro-level blaster, and it is such a good intro-level blaster. I am still very, very impressed with what they have produced. An absolutely solid, full production quality 3S lipo Stryfe. It's really cool that this exists. It's not everything we hoped and dreamed, but it is also their first. And I can only imagine where they're going to go from here. We've seen where Dart Zone has gone from their early stuff, the Nexus, to the Mark IV. Leaps and bounds. The Mark III with what it had. I haven't seen an Omnia yet. Hopefully it'll arrive soon and I'll get to compare it to this thing. It took them a long time to get to where they are. Hasbro came out of the gate with a solid 3S lipo half-dart Stryfe. It's really very, very impressive, and I'm optimistic to see where they go from here. So I would love it. I love it. It probably won't happen, and I shouldn't get my hopes up, but I would love it if their first Springer was a long shot. That would be so cool. If they went Stryfe, long shot, and then develop stuff from the ground up. Once that they've proved that, yes, the Pro is a thing, and it will work, and we can make money, then they'll put the R&D. They're probably already doing it. What am I feeling? This is, years in the development. But I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'm optimistic at this point. I'm really, really pleased. It's refreshing to see Hasbro get so many things right after a real long spell of them getting an awful lot of things wrong. So, cool. All right, let me know what you guys think. How disappointed are you? It's not the greatest thing ever. What do you think they could have done differently? What do you think is the best thing they did? What do you want to see? Let me know, because I really am curious what your perspective from other people in the hobby are. So, there's my critical review of the Nerf Pro Stryfe X. Thank you for watching.